Hey there, Pete Erickson here with Modev. We are recording today another installment of our Meet the Speakers series, and I'm very excited about our next guest. He and I actually have known each other for a few years. He has been covering this space really as an independent analyst, regardless of where he works. And when I noticed that he was maybe in between professional gigs, we had some conversations around doing some research. And a company called HumanFirst.ai smartly grabbed him and has let him continue to really be an independent analyst for the space. And, you know, no better year than this year to do that. He's a wealth of information. He shares what he knows in real time. Definitely want to follow this guy on LinkedIn. A wealth of information and super smart guy. And we are very, very fortunate that he's going to be speaking next week at Voice and AI, and definitely looking forward to his session there. So welcome to the stage, Mr. Cobus Greyling. Cobus, hello, sir.
How are you? Thank you so much. Good, thanks, Pete. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no, I was really excited that you could jump on. And I have watched, you know, this has just been such an interesting year for all of us. And thankfully, there are people out there that are following, not only following the news and just regurgitating what's happening, but actually diving in and, you know, into the tools, into the LLMs, looking underneath the covers, and then sharing more about, you know, what they know. And that really includes you. You're right up there with people that are really tracking this industry so closely. Tell us a little bit more just about you, about your journey in natural language and conversational AI, and kind of how you now find yourself really in the midst of this, you know, this LLM race and generative AI. Tell us a little bit more about you, Cobus.
Thanks, Pete. Actually, I started, I think the human-computer interface always fascinated me, and it always feels like it needs to be conversational, right? So that's the way we prefer to communicate. So back in 2002, we only had IVR, the best we had. So that was my first exposure to conversational interfaces. And as you said, the last year, we really saw an explosion in conversational AI, really. What I find interesting, and I think like you have definitely been on that path, you know, a few years back, voice was all the rage, like Alexa,
right,
Google Home, Siri. And then it kind of pivoted into AI. And now with Meta's voice box and OpenAI's Whisper, we're back at voice again. You know, turning voice into text and creating more training data. So that for me personally is very exciting. And I think just the last comment on that question is that, like, I think what really fascinates me is large language models. It's so powerful, and we're all grappling how to best harness that power and what structures and what architecture works best, you know, to really have accurate input and have accurate output. So, and there's been some very interesting developments around that.
Yeah, no, it is a fascinating time. And you know, you said that, you know, it's like we're back and voice is back. Would you say it's voice, or is it more, you know, natural language is really what's back?
Yes, I would say definitely natural language. Definitely natural language. And also I think the ambit is expanding to include voice into natural language and to allow really you know, a wider range of people to have access to ASR to convert speech into text, and then just again through that add to the training data. So that's why I really find it just feels like voice hit the sweet spot with voice and AI, because there's really in those last few months been a good you know, a good development in terms of voice and AI. So it just feels like it's everything's conspiring at the right time.
Well, I definitely look forward to talking to you more about that, because we're actually, you know, teasing out a little bit of an evolution even for 2024 of the conference, and really recognizing that, you know, there seems to be a new way that the, you know, almost the technology stack is being looked at for enterprises or large organizations, right? And there's these foundational elements that everybody now has to really kind of like understand. I liken it a little bit, and I'd love your input on this. I think about the relational database as really something that when that arrived, it really transformed industries. It didn't get the headlines that today we get because let's face it, technology wasn't as much a part of our lives when the relational database came around in the, in the early 90s. And that's what really drove, companies like, and then there were a bunch of companies that blew up around it, Oracle, certainly because they provided the technology, but Capital One Bank, insurance companies, things that you could do now with the relational database. Marketing companies could now market to individuals, right? And that's what really kind of like set the stage, if you will. But that was the last big sort of, I think, revolution in the way data is managed. And that's what we're at today with large language models. It's a new way to manage our data and to look at it. So I just wanted to get your input on that, sort of that analogy.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that the big part about conversation is obviously it's unstructured. And I think, in the previous era with chatbots and traditional voice bots, the human speech was obviously unstructured. And we had to find a way to structure that data, call on APIs and do processing. And then to speak back to the user, we had to unstructure data again to make it conversational. So the challenge always with traditional chatbots and voice bots were that there were two layers of translation, if you like, structuring human speech input and then unstructuring the computer data back into a conversation. And the beauty about large language models is that it's really unstructured end to end. So your input via prompt engineering is really unstructured. And also your output is unstructured in terms of natural language generation. So that's a blessing and a curse as well,
right?
Because it's really all there unstructured for us to use. But then to structure a business application, to have reliable and accurate responses virtually all the time to customers, especially you mentioned banks, the financial sector. You can't take any risk or chance on your customer in terms of how you respond. So that's the interesting part. And I think that's where a lot of development is going to take place.
Yeah, no, I think you bring up a really interesting point about this unstructured, both input and output, but underneath it all, there has to be something that's understood. And that's a challenge with large language models, right? You also mentioned, banks and risk. Yeah, it is interesting. It's probably not unlike, when you get on the phone with a human being that's, working for American Express or Chase or Capital One. I mean, they're highly trained. They are highly trained with how to engage, because who knows what kind of emotional situation they may be getting into with a customer, right? So we have to highly train humans, and now we have to highly train our large language models in order to do the kinds of things that we need and want them to do. There's this interesting thing happening right now with proprietary large language models and open source large language models, and give us a sense of where you see where do you see this kind of breaking down, just in terms of obviously Anthropic is doing quite well, and others that are on the open source side, and then OpenAI is becoming less open source, over time. But how do you view this landscape from a standpoint of proprietary versus open source?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I think there was this fear initially that we'll be at the behest of one or two large language models. And obviously there are OpenAI, Cohere, AI21 Labs. There are a few commercial endeavors, if you like, in terms of large language models. But I think at this stage, companies like Hugging Face and especially Meta, they are really breaking this stranglehold of the commercial offerings. And I find it so interesting with Meta how disruptive they are, because they're open sourcing so many models, making it virtually freely available. And I think their business case must be that they're using it internally for their own products, but they're making these models available. And I think those are huge market disruptors. And just recently I saw the valuation of Hugging Face, which was just incredible.
4.5 billion. Right.
Yes. So that speaks to the value that they're offering. And also apart from that, and I think that's hopefully something we're going to speak about next week, there's new architecture emerging which decouples enterprise information from the large language model. So obviously recently OpenAI announced fine-tuning for businesses. So the model suppliers want you to fine-tune to kind of lock you into your own model, tune on their larger model. And there's some exciting developments where a business application can become model agnostic in terms of large language models. And I think that bodes well for everyone except those who really want to take control of the market, for sure.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting. And it just seems like the news, it's, there's two things. I mean, there's a lot of PR and a lot of press, right? A lot of announcements, but there seems to be also just kind of this breakneck speed of development and product release. And we seem to also be in this period where it's okay to release a product that isn't done. Like, it's like, that's kind of like the norm now, where they're, so new rules, old rules do not apply to these new markets. And it's like, just get it out there.
Yes, and also, I mean, like, it's true what you say, Pete. Like, the amount of information is staggering. Like, it's drinking from a fire hose.
Yeah.
But I also think that it's interesting how the architecture is snaking through the landscape, and it's continuously changing. And what I find interesting, if I go back to previous articles and research, what was really the given 3 months ago, 6 months ago, is not the given now. And also what I see people, worry about jobs and AI, but the explosion in startups and opportunities is just staggering. And I always try and map out the product and the company landscape, and it's almost an impossible task, at this stage. But there's so many opportunities, and what I find interesting is how the architecture to harness and control these technologies, how it develops over time. So really, I think everyone is finding their way, to be quite honest.
Right.
Like, if someone says, like, I think all the answers, they definitely don't. But that's the fun part to, I always say, activity creates knowledge. And if you build prototypes and you try and build wireframes and POCs, that knowledge becomes valuable.
Absolutely. Let's talk a little bit about your talk at Voice and AI. Tell us a little bit about, what you're going to be speaking on. And I'm just excited people are going to get to meet you in person. But tell us a little bit more about your talk.
So perhaps before I get to the talk, Peter, I must say last year was my first in-person visit at the conference. The networking is on a different level. It's really hard to break away from, just like the conversations into the sessions. So the networking is really, really valuable. But I thought of talking about the large language model landscape. So there's one slide I'm very keen to share, a new slide, in terms of where I try and map out the ripples, where the ripples caused by large language models and how the products fit into those different ripples or zones. And then I would like to talk a bit about the current enterprise architecture. So what I find interesting is that quite a few of the Y Combinator-backed companies started to align on a certain architecture on how to harness large language models. And I'm really keen to share those insights in a very understandable way and a very, very grounded way.
Well, I think that's one of your gifts. Is I've been following your LinkedIn posts, and you do that on LinkedIn almost daily. Break things down that can be highly technical, and make them understandable, which is such a gift. And by the way, thank you for your comments on the networking. This year, we're really leaning in on that as well, just making sure that people do have a chance to meet the people that they're most interested in. We have several different lunch roundtables with different topics. We're also going to be feeding everybody. So breakfast and lunch is available on site. There's snacks and coffee all day long. So, we want people to hang out. We also created an event environment that's very conducive. So the keynote stages and feature stages, and then all the classroom stages are all right there. Everything's super accessible right next to the expo hall. So people are going to get together, and we're going to be together for a couple of days. And I want everybody to meet the people that are most important to them. And that includes people like you. I think you're going to be pretty busy, just given, what you've been up to. Tell us a little bit, I mentioned at the top of the call that, you were snatched up very smartly by HumanFirst.ai. I give that team accolades on landing you. But tell us more about that company, what they offer. And I'm happy to share that they are going to be in the expo hall at Voice and AI as well. Tell us a little bit about the company.
Yeah, so I'm very grateful to be able to be working for HumanFirst. So perhaps just personally, it was just my desire to keep on researching, keep on writing, and sharing that information. And Gregory Whiteside, the CEO of HumanFirst, said, well, come work for us and just create knowledge and share it. And he had this vision of the rising tide lifting all the boats. So he had this vision of just putting out content for everyone and really, assisting the community. So I think from my side, just in short, HumanFirst is basically a tool to help structure training data. So to structure training data for NLU and also for large language models, to turn unstructured data into structured LLM and NLU design data. And then secondly to that, I would say a big component is being able to inspect large language model applications, the input and the output. So to observe firstly, to inspect, and also to tune the input and the output from the large language models. Quality, I think it's a big concern with large language models, and it's something we try and address at HumanFirst.
Quality is everything when it comes to data, right? I think that is top of mind for folks. We are kind of in this new era, I think, of data and how we think about data. We went through the big data hype cycles and a lot of the, that growth in that market. And we're it's sort of like the convergence of many markets, and data being a key one. So HumanFirst smartly is really well positioned to help companies grapple with, very complex challenges when it comes to unstructured data and large language models. Cobus, we're very grateful that you're going to be speaking at Voice and AI. Thank you so much for being a part of the conference, for coming over. Tell us all, where do you live currently?
Oh, so I'm born and bred South African. I grew up in Cape Town. Currently, I live in Johannesburg, South Africa. So I'm the only member of HumanFirst that finds myself on the continent, and it's always a privilege to travel to the US. So I'm really looking forward to that.
Well, I think you're one of about 30 countries that are going to be represented at Voice and AI. We're very excited. People coming from around the world. And now we've got South Africa checked off that list. So thank you so much for making the trip. We look forward to seeing you next week. And have a safe travels. And thanks for joining us today.
Right. Thanks, Pete.
Thanks, Cobus. I'll sign this out. So this is Pete Erickson. We've been talking to Cobus Greyling, the chief evangelist for HumanFirst.ai. Cobus has been following this space so closely. I definitely recommend following him on LinkedIn. He posts regularly on the large language model space, and he actually delves into the large language models and breaks it down for us, what's really happening both across the proprietary and the open source landscapes. He really knows his stuff, and he'll be speaking at Voice and AI. You can check it out at voiceand.ai. The conference is next week, September 5th through 7th in Washington, D.C. Get all the details there, and we hope to see you at the conference. Thanks so much.